Hi. Thank you for attending today's reading. Let's begin. My horrible experience at a mental hospital institution. True story. My name is Ben. I live in the United States. When I was 11 years old, I was a very rebellious and depressed child. I went through that phase after turning 11. One day coming home from school, I told my mom I was really sad and wanted to die, although I didn't want to actually die in the moment. It felt like it. Later that night, my parents decided to take me to the only mental hospital institution in my city. Of course I didn't want to go, but hey, they forced me. When getting to the mental hospital, I was placed into a room where a doctor spoke to me. He was very kind and I stayed there for 6 hours. It was 1 a.m. when my parents and a doctor came in to check on me, and they said they agreed it would be best for me to stay at the institution for 7 days. I started freaking out, but they calmed me down. I said goodbye to my parents and a counselor took me upstairs. I thought I would get my room for my down or something, but no, it was a gym-looking place where there were about 150 kids all packed together in little beds side by side. I was placed in a nasty-looking mattress next to 2 kids who were sleeping. Day 1 looked to be a decent day. They woke us all up at 9 a.m., which was unpleasant since I arrived up there at like 1:30 of the morning. But right when we went to the dining hall, I could tell this was not going to be a fun time. The entire breakfast they served us was a plain toast bread. Nothing else. We could only ask for a cup of water in a little plastic cup to drink. I asked, "Is this it? Can I have more? I'm very hungry," to which a counselor yelled at me and called me ungrateful. The other kids around me, all of whom were around my age, told me straight up not to ask for any favors. Something that struck me is that they all looked so pale, so depressed, so dead inside. The entire day counselors talked to us, sometimes in groups and individually, about our mental problems. We weren't offered lunch, and our next meal was at 7 p.m., where once again it was 2 small buns and a cold piece of meat. That's all for dinner. Oh, and of course the little water in a plastic cup. When I went to sleep that night, I noticed something I didn't in the first night. There were counselors walking past the sleeping kids like every 5 minutes. It was weird. Day 2 was much worse. Same breakfast. Same experience. Dinner was shit again, and somebody stole my dinner. When I asked for dinner, citing the fact somebody literally stole it, a counselor said, "Should have taken better care of it." I actually began to cry, and a counselor yelled at me to stop crying. Day 3 was a nightmare when I wouldn't wake up. The first time we were called to wake up, a counselor came up to me and grabbed my hair. When I told him, "You can't touch me," he punched my forehead and told me to wake the F***ck up. That day was pretty bad because they made us do exercises for some reason. I haven't took a shower in the 3 days I was there, and I asked a counselor when we were going to take showers, to which he replied, "The children that act good take a shower once a week." We run down the list and the least behaved children are on the bottom. If the 2-hour time limit passes, the children whose names we haven't gone through don't take a shower. I was actually confused by what he said, so I asked a kid that was next to me, and he explained that if you ask the counselors questions, you pretty much don't take a shower. Speaking of the bathrooms, they were disgusting. You could tell they haven't been cleaned. There was one bathroom for boys in the hall where we slept, and it was disgusting. It was full of piss on the floor, and it reeked of piss and other smells. You could tell it had not been cleaned in at least a week or 2. Day 4 was quite possibly the worst day. I took time getting to the dining hall, and so my breakfast got taken. Same thing happened with my dinner later on in the day. The counselors refused to give me food right before going to bed that day. I told a counselor to Give me food, now," in a loud voice that caused me to be borderline dragged to the office of the person they called. The president, who was basically the leader of the hospital, institution in which he told me that he was going to call my parents and tell them I would have to stay in the hospital for longer if I kept acting up. I was afraid by this point. When I went to bed that night, a kid who was to the left of my bed named Matthew asked me why I'm here. I told him because I misbehave a lot and because I said I wanted to die. He explained he was only here because he got his parents called once in school. He told me his 7 days were extended to 3 weeks, then again to 2 months for doing the same thing I was doing, complaining to the counselors. That's when I was about to lose it. I could be here for months. He told me to keep quiet because we were supposed to be asleep. That's when I saw him pull out from his bedsheets what looked like a cell phone. I asked him how he managed to smuggle that in here, to which he said it was his mom's second phone. And he stole it when he realized he would be coming here. He put it in his shoe. I have no clue how that kid's phone still had battery after 1 month and a half of being in that hellhole. I asked if I could use his phone to call my parents. He gave me his phone and I dialed my dad first. I was afraid they wouldn't answer because it was like 10:30 and they sleep early because they gave early jobs. My dad did not pick up. Then I ringed my mom, and right after hanging up, when it was clear she wouldn't answer, my dad called. I answered and explained it was Ben and how they were literally starving me here. I told him everything. I begged him to pick me up and I couldn't take it anymore. Before he could even say anything, I hung up because a counselor was making his nightly round and he was getting close. I gave Matthew back his phone and said thank you. The next day was my last at breakfast. My toast got stolen once again, but not my water. Matthew at this point told me straight up he was going to get revenge upon himself or his parents. After he left the hospital, I was actually shocked someone would do harm to their parents for bringing him here. He said it was just a thought and that he loved his parents, so he wouldn't do that. At around noon, I was called to the office of the president again, to which my parents were explaining they wanted me to come home. I gave my parents a big hug in the office. Never before had I been so glad to see my parents. My parents asked the president of the institution and a doctor and counselor that were there if me being starved was true, to which they said it was a lie, and the counselor showed a picture on his shitty iPhone 4 of children eating in the dining hall, smiling and posing for the picture. That picture was straight up bullshit. I did not see one kid smiling the entire time I was there. Even though my parents believed the hospital side of the story, they still took me home as I was. Leaving, the counselor who pulled my hair just days earlier gave me a last pat on the back. My parents never truly believed my story, but they still took me to the police office about a month later to give the police details. The police couldn't do anything because in the hall there were no security cameras, and so they had no proof. I was disappointed, but it wasn't their fault. I told almost everyone I could in my city this story, and ever since it happened, weird shit has happened at my house. 2 years ago, my mom's car's tires got popped. She hired a private investigator to investigate all the things like the tire popping and a fire that was started at my house, and although the private investigator couldn't find anything conclusive, he did find that the person who popped my mom's tires was a 32-year-old man. At first it didn't seem out of the ordinary until he found a picture of the man and the president of the hospital institution on the man's Facebook profile. That's when it hit us that this is all being done by hospital or somebody associated with the hospital for retribution. We plan to move out of the city in March, but our moving got delayed by the COVID pandemic. We are moving in about 20 days or so. The last attack on my family that happened was a few months ago where my garage was spray painted. My mom decided not to press charges against the 32-year-old and we just want to leave and not be bothered. My only advice is if you plan on sending your child to a mental hospital, institution good, but please do not leave them alone with a counselor, doctor, anyone from the institution. And do not leave them in alone for more than a day. It's been almost 10 years since this experience. I hope Matthew is doing okay and I hope he hasn't done anything bad and that he got out of the institution. End of story. That is all for today. If you want to support my automated channel, feel free to drop a like and subscribe. See you tomorrow.